Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip into something ancient, dusty, and just a little bit forbidden. Imagine a desert night where the stars press down heavy, the air dry enough to crack your lips, and a cave mouth yawning like some secret keeper. This isn't your cozy living room with a blanket and a fan. This is Qumran in the Judean desert, and trust me, you would not survive one night here with your Target water bottle and your Wi-Fi addiction. You'd melt, or worse, get bored. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It honestly makes me so happy to know someone in London is dozing off, while someone in Kansas is pulling the covers up at 3 a.m. I love seeing the map of sleepy dots lighting up across the world. Now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself walking across the sand, the crunch under your sandals soft but insistent. The caves loom ahead, their openings like half-closed eyes, watching you with a kind of silent judgment. The Dead Sea itself lies nearby, glimmering in the moonlight, so salty it refuses to host even a fish, like the world's grumpiest swimming pool. People have floated here for thousands of years, which is funny, because all that floating, and yet no one ever truly relaxed here. Not until 1947, when a boy chasing a goat tossed a stone into one of these caves, and the sound it made changed. History, the thud of pottery breaking, is not exactly the sound of destiny, but that's what it was. Imagine him, probably annoyed that his goat had wandered, throwing a rock in frustration, then pausing at that crack of clay echoing in the cave. Curiosity won, as it usually does, and he scrambled inside. What he found wasn't treasure, not in the shiny coin sense, but jars stuffed with brittle scrolls, hidden for almost 2,000 years. You'd probably scroll past them on eBay thinking they were some old receipts, but no. These were manuscripts, biblical texts, hymns, even strange prophecies that seemed to whisper from another time as you crouch in the darkness. You picture the boy holding that first parchment, unrolling it with rough hands, not realizing he had touched something scholars had dreamed of for centuries. His world was goats and stones and dust, not cosmic secrets. Yet here he was, breaking open one of the great mysteries of the 20th century. The scrolls themselves were fragile, ink fading, Hebrew and Aramaic letters dancing across the surface. Some were easy to understand, stories you might recognize from Sunday school or from that one History Channel binge you regret admitting. But others, those are the ones that set your skin tingling even now. Prophecies that spoke of wars, of children of light against children of darkness, of a teacher of righteousness and a wicked priest. Scholars argued, of course, because that's what scholars do when you hand them something juicy. Was this about the Romans? Was it metaphor? Or was it one of those timeless human dramas we keep replaying like a Netflix show renewed for too many seasons? The caves kept giving. Over the years, more scrolls surfaced, like shy secrets surfacing one at a time. And with each discovery, the questions deepened. Who hid them here? Why? Were these just a community's library stuffed in jars? Or were they carefully sealed to protect forbidden words? It's easy to imagine the people of Qumran scurrying into the caves, arms full of manuscripts, hearts pounding as soldiers marched nearby. The desert winds whipping around them, the scrolls bound tight, the jars sealed. The silence afterward. Maybe they thought someone, someday, would return for them. Instead, centuries piled like sand over the secret, until one irritated boy and his goat stumbled into the story. And here's the thing: historians still argue, sometimes heatedly, about whether this strange sect, who lived like desert monks, really wrote these texts, or were they looted from Jerusalem's temple and hidden here like divine contraband. No one can say with certainty, which is part of the fun. Nothing puts scholars in a good mood like disagreeing over a mystery. The air grows colder in the cave as you imagine these scrolls tucked away. They're prophecies sealed not just by jars, but by centuries of silence. They whisper of futures that may or may not have come true, futures that scared those in power enough to keep them hidden. It's like finding a diary your grandma locked away, except instead of gossip about neighbors, it hints at cosmic battles and messianic figures. Honestly, you'd almost prefer the gossip, as your fingers trace the walls of the cave. You think about how strange it is that we, with all our smartphones and satellites, still lean forward at bedtime to hear about scraps of parchment. But that's the pull of Prophesied. Makes you wonder what you don't know, what might be just around the corner, or what's already happened a dozen times before in different disguises. The night outside is quiet, except for the faint lapping of the Dead Sea. Its stillness is eerie, like the whole landscape holds its breath. The stars shine brighter here than in any city, but instead of comfort, they feel like watchful eyes, glittering judgments from above. You pull your cloak tighter, because in stories like this, you always have a cloak, and you feel the edge of excitement tingle along your skin. Somewhere in this darkness, words forbidden, or at least inconvenient, have waited to be found. And maybe the strangest part is how something so old still feels familiar. The prophecies whisper about fear, about enemies, about waiting for someone to come and fix everything. Tell me that doesn't sound like half the conversations online today. We haven't changed as much as we liked to pretend. The Dead Sea Scrolls remind us that humanity has always written down its worries, tucked them away, and hoped someone in the future might understand. So here you are, in the cave with me, brushing dust off prophecies that were never meant to survive this long. Your eyelids grow heavy, but your curiosity holds them open a little longer. Because if words could last 2,000 years in jars of clay, maybe they still have something to tell you tonight. You're still standing in the mouth of that cave, the air cool and echoing when your mind drifts back to the beginning. It wasn't a scholar in tweed or a priest with candles who found these scrolls. No, it was a teenage shepherd, probably more worried about keeping his goats in line than uncovering a 2,000-year-old mystery. The year was 1947, and somewhere near Qumran, a boy tossed a stone into the darkness. He expected the dull thunk of rock against rock. Instead, the sound of pottery breaking, a sound that would ripple across the world. You can picture him, barefoot maybe, or with sandals slapping the dust. The desert sun had baked everything into exhaustion, and he's restless, chasing one stubborn goat that refuses to stick with the flock. In frustration, he hurls a stone into the cave, probably muttering curses under his breath. The kind of curses you mutter when you realize goats might be smarter than you. And then the shattering, not thunder, not divine intervention, just clay breaking. Yet that sound contained the weight of centuries. The boy blinked. Should he run? Should he look inside? Curiosity won. Of course it did. If it had been you, you might have shrugged and gone home to dinner, because who needs extra work? But he climbed inside, eyes adjusting to the dimness. His hands brushed against jars taller than his knees, sealed with lids that crumbled at his touch. The smell of age was thick, dust and dryness, the kind that makes your throat itch. And inside, instead of treasure, instead of coins, he found scrolls. Think about it. You find brittle parchment, letters you can't even read, probably thinking it's trash. For him, it was more like, great, I broke someone's storage jar. Now I'm in trouble. He had no idea that scholars in far-off cities would soon be whispering about these texts like they were the gossip of the century. The boy just dragged a few out, probably wondering if he could sell them in the market. Because when you're a shepherd, you don't dream of shaking world religions. You dream of extra bread, maybe new shoes. And yet here we are, decades later, still unraveling the thread he tugged loose with one lucky throw. Some of those scrolls ended up with antiquities dealers in Bethlehem, bartered like second-hand rugs. Imagine someone haggling over them. They're old, but who wants them? One buyer tried to advertise them in a newspaper under the headline, "Biblical Manuscripts for Sale," which honestly sounds like the worst eBay listing of all time. Scholars eventually realized their importance, but not before a few were handled with less care than your grandma's china. The story always makes you laugh a little. Humanity stumbles into its greatest treasures by accident. The boy was looking for a goat, and instead he tripped over a mystery that would keep universities buzzing for the next 70+ years. It's almost comforting, isn't it? That history's big moments don't always come from great leaders making speeches. Sometimes it's a tired teenager throwing rocks at a hole. Makes your own clumsy mistakes feel a little less tragic. When scholars first examined the scrolls, excitement mixed with suspicion. Could they be fakes? Some fragments were so fragile they flaked apart in hands. But tests confirmed the ink, the parchment, the language ancient, genuine. Suddenly, the scholarly world was wide awake. Here were texts older than anything in the libraries of Europe, manuscripts that predated many known biblical copies by 1,000 years. That's like finding a draft of Shakespeare written in his messy teenage handwriting. Of course, debates began instantly. Who wrote them? Why were they hidden? And more urgently, who gets to control them? Some scrolls were locked away in museums, others held by religious institutions. Scholars argued over access, fighting like kids over toys, while the rest of the world waited. Meanwhile, the shepherd boy who had stumbled onto them, he faded into the background, his name remembered only in footnotes. History rarely gives its credit to the right people. The goat probably deserved a statue. Picture again that first night. The dessert cooling, the boy walking home with fragments under his arm. He probably had no idea what he carried. Just scraps, maybe worth a few coins. The irony is almost painful. The scrolls had been waiting centuries, hidden through wars and empires, guarded by silence, only to be pulled out by accident. They survived floods of time, only to risk ending up as bargaining chips in a dusty shop window. But somehow, enough survived. Enough to send waves of curiosity through every corner of the world. Enough to make us sit here tonight, in the glow of your bedside lamp, talking about them as though we were there. The boy never knew the sound his stone made would echo forever. You wonder, as your eyes get heavy, how many accidents in your own life are really beginnings of stories you can't see yet. Maybe breaking something, losing something, or throwing one careless stone is just the start of your own hidden scroll. The cave quiets again, your imagination filling in the silence with the faint bleating of a goat, the shuffle of sand under bare feet, the echo of a jar cracking. The shepherd is gone, but the sound remains, and the story begins. The cave grows quieter as you imagine those jars pried open one by one. Scrolls lifted out like fragile skins of time. They weren't intact tomes you could place neatly on a shelf. Most were fragments, brittle, torn, edges missing as if moths of history had been nibbling at them for centuries. A sentence here, a word there, and sometimes nothing but ink stains fading into parchment. It's like trying to piece together a Netflix series from half the subtitles. You get the gist, but you're never entirely sure who's fighting who. And yet, even through the broken pieces, voices emerge. Prophecies whisper about battles between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. You roll that phrase around in your head and it sounds dramatic, like some rejected Marvel spin-off. But to the people who wrote it, this wasn't comic book fantasy. It was the cosmic struggle, the destiny of humankind written as if in fire. These scraps spoke of wars not just with swords and shields, but wars of the soul. Battles in which light would triumph if only the faithful held on long enough. The fragments are maddening. Imagine holding one up in your hands, ink smudged, letters missing, a prophecy cut in mid-sentence. And then the sons of darkness shall what? Go to the market. Take a nap. You'll never know. Scholars argue over every missing line, filling the silence with guesses. Some say the prophecies pointed to real conflicts with the Romans. Others claim they were timeless parables about the struggle inside each person. And a few insist they foretold messianic figures, leaders who would appear to change everything. What makes it deliciously frustrating is that the juiciest lines are often the ones missing. It's as though the universe itself wanted to keep you on a cliffhanger. The scrolls tell you just enough to make you lean forward, eyes wide, then snatch away the ending. It's basically ancient clickbait, but here's a curious detail. Some fragments were copied with exquisite care. Ink laid down by steady hands, lines perfect. Others looked rushed, messy, as though someone had scribbled them down in a panic, hiding words before soldiers burst in. That mix of precision and haste leaves you wondering, were these prophecies revered scripture, or just desperate notes passed between frightened believers? You think about the Essenes, that strange desert sect most often blamed or credited for writing these texts. They lived apart, refusing city life, bathing daily in ritual purity, eating simple meals, and waiting for the end of the world like it was a scheduled event. Their scrolls spoke of a teacher of righteousness, some mysterious leader who stood against a wicked priest. Scholars have thrown around names, pointing to high priests in Jerusalem, or even Roman officials. But no agreement has ever been nailed down. The mystery lingers, and maybe that's the point. In the fragments, the prophecies don't read like fortune cookies. They're not cheerful predictions of wealth or love. They're heavy, soaked in doom and hope at once. Light versus darkness. The faithful versus the corrupt. You can almost hear the scratching of the scribe's pen, pressing too hard in conviction, writing words meant to outlast him. Imagine believing the end was coming, and yet still bothering to put it down on parchment. It's a level of dedication you can respect even if you're not exactly signing up for desert, monastic life anytime soon. And there's that silence. The gaps in the scrolls where time has eaten away words. It's funny sometimes, what's missing is louder than what remains. The absence becomes a kind of prophecy itself, a reminder that no matter how hard we try, history always leaves us dangling with unanswered questions. You start to see the fragments, not just as broken texts, but as mirrors. Every missing word forces you to fill it in with your own imagination, your own fears, your own hope. The ancients whisper, and you finish their sentences. Of course, modern readers can't resist turning the fragments into predictions for today. Wars in the Middle East, clearly foretold. Political corruption, obviously mentioned. Your neighbor's annoying leaf blower. Maybe not, but you'd believe it if someone translated it that way. Prophecies have a way of being elastic. They stretch to fit whatever moment we're living in. And isn't that the real magic? A 2,000-year-old scrap can still feel like it's talking directly to you, which is more than you can say for half the emails in your inbox. What you notice, as your thoughts wander, is how fragile human certainty really is. One missing line, one lost word, and entire interpretations collapse. Scholars fight over whether a smudge means light or fight. Generations of meaning can hang on a single faded stroke of ink. And still, despite all the debate, the scrolls endure, tugging us along with their half-finished sentences and broken promises. You step deeper into the cave, feeling that silence settle around you again. The scrolls rest in your hands like brittle wings. They don't shout. They whisper. They tease. And you realize that's why they still matter. They don't give you answers. They leave you with questions. The kind of questions that keep you awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the battle of light and darkness is still going on right outside your door, maybe inside your own head. The fragments crumble a little between your fingers, but the words remain, even unfinished, even torn. They carry a weight that presses into you. They remind you that humans have always worried about the future, always written down their fears in hopes that someone, someday, might understand. And maybe that's the prophecy, after all, not a prediction of events, but proof that we are never really alone in our anxieties. Across centuries, across languages, someone else has felt what you feel tonight. The cave narrows, shadows pressing closer, and as you hold one of those brittle fragments, you realize something ironic. The words were hidden for centuries in silence, only to be hidden again once modern hands grabbed hold of them. Not by sand, not by clay jars, but by scholars, priests, and committees who decided the world wasn't ready. That's right, to finally break open 2,000-year-old mysteries. And the first thing people do is lock them away like embarrassing family letters. It started innocently enough. The scrolls passed through dealers, collectors, museums. Scholars rushed in, eyes gleaming, eager to read every syllable. But then something happened. A tight circle of academics, mostly in Jerusalem, decided to keep the best pieces under wraps. They claimed it was to preserve the fragile texts, to avoid misinterpretation, to ensure careful study. All very noble sounding, except years went by, then decades, and access remained as rare as a good Wi-Fi signal in the desert. You can imagine the frustration. Historians outside the inner circle begged for a glimpse, a photo, a translation. But no, the scrolls were guarded like royal jewels. Whispers spread. Maybe they contained prophecies that challenged the Bible. Maybe they revealed embarrassing truths about early faith. Maybe they predicted events so terrifying that no one dared publish them. The longer the silence stretched, the wilder the rumors grew. Humans hate locked doors. Our imaginations kick them open. It wasn't just religious believers who felt uneasy. Even secular scholars were irritated, locked out of the most important discovery of the century. They began to suspect power games, ivory towers, gatekeeping. Was it about protecting sacred truths, or about academic prestige? Probably both, because nothing says scholarship, quite like hoarding knowledge until only your friends get to peek. The secrecy made the scrolls hotter than ever. People started calling them forbidden prophecies, dangerous texts, hidden revelations, and maybe they weren't wrong. Think about it. The fragments hinted at battles between good and evil, messianic figures, secret teachers, and corrupt priests. If you were running a church, a government, or just a dinner party, would you really want those words floating around without context? Probably not. Prophecies are troublemakers. They stir up people's imaginations. They make folks question authority. And they always sound just vague enough to apply to whatever crisis you're already panicking about. Meanwhile, the actual scrolls sat quietly, pressed between glass, fading slowly. Isn't it funny? The world spun itself into conspiracies while the parchments themselves did what they'd always done: waited. It was the human drama around them that gave them power. The scrolls were like introverts at a party, silent in the corner, while everyone else shouted about what they might say. You picture the archives, climate-controlled rooms where only a handful of hands could touch the fragile pages, guards at the door, rules strict, access denied. For years, the only words released to the public were carefully selected, translated, and published in small doses. It's like Netflix dropping one episode a year and telling you to be patient. Naturally, people got suspicious, and suspicion is fuel. Books appeared, whispering of Vatican conspiracies, of suppressed prophecies predicting the end of the world, of scrolls so dangerous they could topple faith itself. Of course, most of that was fantasy, but you can't really blame people. When you create silence, you also create an echo chamber where every theory, no matter how bizarre, sounds possible. The truth, as always, is slipperier. Historians still argue about whether the secrecy was justified. Some defend it, saying the scrolls were too fragile, too important to rush. Others condemn it as elitism, a betrayal of knowledge. You can almost hear them bickering across decades, one group clutching their parchments like dragon hordes, the other pounding on the gates demanding to be let in. And here's the joke. The scrolls that were hidden so carefully eventually leaked anyway. Photographs circulated, copies slipped into the open, translations emerged. The fortress cracked, as fortresses always do. By the 1990s, the forbidden prophecies were suddenly everywhere. Their mystery both unveiled and somehow deepened. Because once you have the words, you realize the words themselves are just as fragmentary, as ambiguous, as frustrating as ever. It wasn't really the secrecy that made them mysterious. It was the nature of prophecy itself. Still, you can't help but smile at the absurdity. 2,000 years buried in caves, then half a century buried in filing cabinets. Humanity loves repeating patterns. We lock things away and then get mad about not being able to see them. It's a cycle as eternal as laundry. As you picture those scholars hunched over manuscripts, pens scratching, eyes tired, you sense the same heartbeat that ran through the desert sects long ago. People guarding words because they think the words matter too much to be left loose. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. But either way, the scrolls keep whispering. And the whispers grow louder the more people try to hush them. The cave air presses in heavier now, as though you've stumbled into not just ancient silence, but modern silence layered on top. You think about how knowledge isn't just about discovery, it's about who decides to share, who decides to keep it hidden, and why. And that thought lingers, curling around you like smoke. As you step deeper into the shadows, you hear it again, that faint echo, almost like parchment whispering from the dark. Read me, or lose me forever. Melodramatic, isn't it? But the drama wasn't really inside the scrolls, was in how humans decided to treat them. There was a whole period when the Dead Sea Scrolls weren't just hidden in caves. They were, quite literally, hidden by people. Not destroyed, not burned in a bonfire that would have been too obvious, but quietly placed under lock and key. Labeled as too sensitive, too dangerous, too inconvenient. Picture this, a handful of scholars sitting in dusty rooms in the 1960s, holding keys that opened cabinets filled with history. And outside, the rest of the academic world, journalists, students, curious readers, pressing their noses against the glass, asking, "What's in there?" The answer, again and again, "We're working on it." Give us, another decade or two. Comforting, right? Why hide them at all? Some sections of the scrolls spoke of a teacher of righteousness who clashed with a wicked priest. Some contained visions of a final war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. Sounds like the setup for a blockbuster series, or at least a very intense role-playing game. But for the authorities of the time, those passages were a nightmare. They could inspire dangerous ideas. They could destabilize faith. They could, heaven forbid, make people start asking questions. Now imagine you're one of those scholars, sitting at a desk with piles of fragile fragments in front of you. You've spent years learning ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. You've squinted at faded letters until your eyes blurred. And then you're told you can't publish what you've translated, not yet. The result? You sip cold coffee, sigh heavily, and wonder why you ever left law school. A lesser-known fact. For many years, even copies weren't widely shared. No photocopies, no typed transcripts, nothing. If you weren't in the tiny club of approved scholars, the words might as well not exist. That secrecy, unsurprisingly, fueled rumors like dry tinder under a spark. And did the rumors catch fire. Some swore the scrolls contained the exact date of the apocalypse. Others whispered that they revealed Jesus by name, centuries before the Gospels. A few more creative souls decided the scrolls had instructions for secret rituals, hidden treasures, or perhaps even a recipe for immortality, tea. People are inventive when denied the truth, let's be fair. Though the guardians of the scrolls may not have been evil masterminds. Some genuinely feared misinterpretation. Others argued the fragments were too fragile, too incomplete, too confusing for the general public. A noble excuse, perhaps. Or maybe a very convenient one. After all, power often lies not in what you say, but in what you keep silent. It makes you wonder were the scrolls really banned because of dangerous content, or because of the dangerous possibility of losing control over belief. People still debate that question, and maybe they always will. Let's zoom in on a vivid scene. A quiet reading room in Jerusalem, late at night. A scholar hunches over a glass case, the only sound the scratching of his pencil. Behind him, a heavy wooden cabinet is locked with a clinking chain. The air smells of dust, ink, and frustration. Outside the window, the city is alive with rumors, but in here, the scrolls lie silent. It's almost comical treasures of faith and history, treated like contraband. And of course, secrecy breeds humor, too. Imagine a group of students speculating outside the library. Maybe the scrolls say the world ends next week. No, it's a prophecy about taxes going up. Actually, I heard it says instant coffee will conquer humanity. Truly terrifying. When the restrictions finally loosened and the texts were published more broadly, the reaction was mixed. Instead of doomsday schedules or cosmic revelations, many scrolls turned out to be community rules, prayer collections, or even inventory lists. Practical, ordinary, sometimes poetic, but hardly the dynamite people had been promised. In other words, the scandal wasn't in the scrolls, but in the secrecy. Still, the damage, or perhaps the magic, was done. The label of forbidden made the scrolls legendary. Human beings have a strange tendency. The more you lock something away, the louder it echoes in our imagination. You could hide a shopping list in a vault, and someone, somewhere, would decide it was the key to immortality. So here you are, lying back, listening to these whispers, and you can almost hear the sighs of those locked cabinets. For decades, the scrolls were trapped not by time, not by desert sands, but by human caution and politics. Banned or forgotten, sealed or silenced, they still managed to breathe through the cracks, tugging at curiosity. And maybe you feel it now too, that soft tug. Your eyelids grow heavier, but your mind still wonders what secrets might lie in old parchment. You exhale slowly, let your thoughts settle, and remind yourself, mystery often lives not in the words themselves, but in the shadows around them. You hear the desert again, its silence pressing against your ears. And then faint but sharp, like voices carried by the wind, you sense a murmur of defiance. It's almost as if the scrolls themselves wanted to remind you. They weren't only prayers and rules. They were sometimes shouts against the order of the day. The community that left these writings, often linked to the Essenes, didn't exactly blend in. Picture them, austere, disciplined, withdrawn from the noise of Jerusalem. They traded the bustle of markets and temple courtyards for a life of ritual baths and strict meals. To modern ears, it sounds like a wellness retreat with fewer smoothies and a lot more rules. And yet, hidden between those lines of scripture and prophecy, you catch glimpses of anger, of protest. Someone had a bone to pick with the priests in power. There's that mysterious teacher of righteousness, whose followers believed he carried the true path, only to be hounded by a wicked priest. You can almost see the drama unfold like a stage play. One man preaching purity, another draped in wealth and corruption. The scrolls don't give you their names, which of course only makes the guessing game louder. And for centuries now, scholars have argued over who they might have been. But when you're lying here, eyes growing heavier, what matters is the human echo conflict, rivalry. That eternal battle between ideals and institutions. Let's pause on a scene, a gathering in the desert. Firelight flickering against rough stone walls. Men in white robes sit cross-legged, listening to a leader read aloud from a parchment. His voice trembles, not with fear, but with urgency. The words speak of separation from the corrupt world, of waiting for the day when justice would break like dawn. Outside, the stars are indifferent, silent, shining down on a group of dreamers who dared to imagine a different order. What makes it strangely poignant is how small they were, teeny, compared to the empires that loomed around them. Yet, in their careful handwriting, in their stored jars, they left ripples that reached all the way to us. And if you lean close enough in your imagination, you might hear them say, "We resisted, in the only way we could, by writing, by preserving, by hoping." It's almost funny how timeless that feels. You scroll through social media today and see the same pattern. Someone shouting against corruption, others rolling their eyes, some applauding. Replace the parchment with a post, the clay jar with cloud storage, and suddenly you realize not much has changed, except the snacks are better. Here's something not often noticed. Those strict communal rules weren't just about piety. They were survival tactics. Sharing meals, living apart from outsiders, even regulating who could join. They created cohesion in a desert where life was harsh. It wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake. It was a stubborn insistence. We will endure, even against the odds. And tucked within those voices are hints of politics too. Some scholars suspect the community wasn't merely spiritual isolationists, but had connections to movements resisting Roman rule, which makes sense if you're reading prophecies of a final battle between light and darkness. It's hard not to start picturing legionaries marching in the dust as the villains. Of course, certainty slips through your fingers, but that's the allure. The silence between the lines invites you to wonder, so you close your eyes and imagine again. Sandals crunching on dry earth, whispered debates under torchlight, an argument about who really speaks for God. It's messy. It's human. It's strangely relatable. And there's a quiet humor in realizing that people 2,000 years ago were already dealing with office politics, just in flowing robes instead of neckties. What lingers is the courage, or maybe the stubbornness, of those voices. They weren't kings, they weren't generals, yet they carved a place in history by simply refusing to stay silent. And tonight, as you listen with your head sinking deeper into the pillow, you realize how gentle that rebellion feels now. No swords raised, no mobs in the street, just words, fragile words, surviving in jars, and as your breath slows, you let that thought soften into your chest. Maybe resistance doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes those whispers last longer than empires. The night around you feels heavier now, as though the air itself is pulling you deeper. And maybe that's fitting, because what comes next in the scrolls is not gentle, not quiet, but the grand drama of opposites. The sons of light, arrayed in shining armor, set against the sons of darkness, grim and shadowed, ready for a war that would shake the cosmos. The descriptions read like the world's earliest action movie script, except with fewer explosions and more handwritten rules about how many priests should blow trumpets at the right time. Still, you can't help but feel the intensity. Imagine it. A dusty plain outside Jerusalem, banners snapping in the wind, warriors tightening the straps of their sandals, their hearts thumping like drums, and above them, the sky bracing for thunder, as if heaven itself were holding its breath. It's easy to dismiss these passages as pure metaphor, the sort of thing you doodle when you've had too much wine and not enough sleep. Yet, you sense the deep longing behind them. The people who preserved these visions weren't craving entertainment, they were craving justice. They looked at the world, saw corruption thriving, power crushing the weak, and they dreamed of a final reversal. Light would triumph. Darkness would be undone. Here's where things get beautifully human. The scrolls lay out detailed rules for this cosmic showdown. Who marches first? Who carries which banner? Who recites which blessing? It's bureaucracy dressed as apocalypse. You can almost picture an ancient scribe arguing, "No, no, the trumpeters go in row 3. Otherwise the whole thing falls apart." It's both inspiring and faintly absurd, like planning a potluck dinner and also deciding it will determine the fate of the universe. Close your eyes and picture it. Thousands gathered, their faces lit by dawn. Some clutch spears, others scrolls. The sons of light stand with their leader, perhaps trembling, perhaps thrilled. Across the valley, the sons of darkness waved silent, like a storm cloud ready to break. The scene swells in your imagination, and you realize it was never just about swords and dust. It was about the eternal struggle between what we hope for and what we fear. And doesn't that sound familiar? You wake up today, scroll through the news, and it's still framed as battles between light and dark, heroes and villains, truth and lies. We like to think we've evolved, but really we've just swapped the battlefield for a screen and the trumpets for breaking news alerts. The same tension hums underneath. The world feels stilted, unfair, maybe even doomed. Yet somewhere in us we cling to the idea that light wins in the end, something often overlooked. The text doesn't really promise an easy victory. The battle is long, grueling, filled with setbacks. Light stumbles, regroups, and pushes again. That endurance is the real prophecy. Not a sudden miracle, but a reminder that hope sometimes limps before it soars. You imagine again, drifting with the vision. A clash of shields, the gleam of bronze catching the sun, dust curling upward like incense. And yet, through the roar, there's a quiet faith that even in chaos, purpose endures. There's humor too, if you let yourself hear it. Think of a group of robe-clad scribes huddled over parchment, debating how many days the sons of light should camp between battles. It's the world's first strategy meeting, and probably just as tedious as the ones you've sat through at work. Only this one ends with heaven descending. Instead of someone reminding you about quarterly budgets, what lingers as your breathing slows is not fear, not dread, but something gentler. You sense the yearning of those ancient dreamers, tired of corruption, tired of shadow, imagining a brighter dawn. The scrolls don't just hand you a war, they hand you the comfort of believing that struggle matters. That light, however battered, still rises. And as you drift, half awake, half in their desert vision, you let the clash fade into softness. Because battles end, but the hope behind them whispers on. You drift from the battlefield of ancient light and shadow, and when your eyes adjust, you are not in myth any longer, but in the mid-20th century. The air smells of ink and cigarette smoke, that post-war temps of optimism wrapped in paranoia. Neon signs flicker on rain-slicked streets, radios hum in living rooms, and television set small. Boxy, glowing spill, black and white images into family parlors. You sit there, cross-legged on the carpet, watching grainy footage of rockets, presidents, mushroom clouds. The world feels like it's expanding and collapsing at the same time. And right there, beside you, the whispers begin again. Except this time, they are not about gods or giants, but about governments, hidden labs, and strangers in the sky. Conspiracies are the modern mythology, dressed in trench coats instead of togas. One night, in the summer of 1947, newspapers shout about a crash in Roswell, New Mexico. Farmers claim wreckage, the army insists it's a weather balloon, and suddenly everyone looks nervously at the stars. You imagine yourself wandering dusty roads near that desert town, hearing locals murmur in diners, their coffee going cold as they whisper about saucer-shaped crafts. What really fell that night? Official statements changed so many times that even now historians mutter, not all in agreement, about whether it was misdirection, mistake, or something stranger. The truth may have hit the ground harder than the object itself. But the story doesn't stop with Roswell. In smoky lecture halls of the 1950s, slides click into place, showing diagrams of rockets, orbits, satellites. The Cold War turns the sky into a chessboard. and paranoia into currency. Every beep of Sputnik above makes Americans wonder if the Soviets can put a ball in orbit. Can they also watch us, listen in, perhaps, control us? You glance at the ceiling, half expecting it to creak with invisible wires. By the 1960s, the conspiracies march right into the heart of television. A grainy broadcast of men walking on the moon shadows too sharp, the flag that seems to flutter. In your living room, a neighbor leans too close to the screen and mutters. You can see the stage lights. He swears the whole thing was filmed in a studio. You try not to laugh, but his earnest face is hard to ignore. Whisper it softly. Some people still believe Neil Armstrong's footprints were made in Nevada sand. And oddly enough, the cameras used during the Apollo missions were so specialized that later, when analyzed, even lighting experts argued over the odd contrast. So the debate still circles like a lonely satellite. Fast forward to the 1970s. Picture yourself in a cramped Washington office, files stacked like leaning towers, the air stale with old paper. Investigators flip through documents marked classified. The Watergate scandal bursts open, and suddenly the public realizes governments do hide things, sometimes petty, sometimes monumental. And once you know they lie, the floodgates of suspicion are impossible to close. A man in a wrinkled suit leans close and tells you in a low voice that the CIA experimented with mind control using LSD. You nearly choke on your coffee. But yes, fragments of that truth really did slip out in congressional hearings. It's not paranoia if some of it actually happened. Outside, people line up at movie theaters to watch thrillers about shadowy agencies and faceless men in dark cars. Conspiracy has become not just fear, but entertainment. And here's the strange comfort. When you can't control the world, at least you can imagine it's all being orchestrated by someone else. Terrifying, yes, but also oddly reassuring. Better a puppet master than no master at all. Now picture the 1990s. A different hum dial-up tones buzzing through plastic computers. Chat rooms filling with strangers typing in green text fonts. You're at your desk, fingers tapping. When someone posts a grainy photo of a triangular UFO, the rumor spreads faster than wildfire because now, whispers have wings called the internet. You can almost hear them fluttering across the world in seconds, bouncing from basement to basement, glowing on CRT screens in bedrooms lit only by their electronic glow. People gather not in taverns but in forums with names like Truth Seekers and the Hidden Eye. Conspiracy has gone digital, electric, unstoppable dot. But woven into all this are smaller, stranger tales. Did you know that during the Cold War, some governments invested serious money into psychic research, testing whether people could remote view hidden bases across the globe? You lean in, eyebrows raised, whispering to yourself, wait, so tax money went to clairvoyance? Yes, it did. Some files declassified later show detailed drawings of foreign facilities, strangely accurate, sometimes laughably off. It blurs the line between science fiction and national defense. No wonder suspicion thrives. And then comes the 21st century, where you stand now, scrolling through endless feeds. Conspiracies morph into memes, polished into viral clips. One moment, someone insists lizard people run the government. The next, they're joking about it with an animated GIF. That's the trick of modern Furit, wears a clown nose while sharpening its teeth. You exhale slowly, your phone glowing in your hand, wondering whether you're more amused or unsettled. A lesser-known quirk. Even the word conspiracy theory was sharpened deliberately. Documents suggest intelligence agencies encouraged its use in the 1960s as a way to dismiss critics of official narratives. So every time someone mutters the phrase, they're already playing in a rigged game. It's like calling someone a magician when they're just trying to explain how the rabbit got in the hat, and yet, despite the paranoia, you smile softly. Because conspiracies, modern or ancient, are also a kind of bedtime story. They remind us that humans crave pattern, meaning a sense that the shadows on the wall are cast by something we can understand. It's frightening to think chaos rules. It's comforting in a twisted way. To believe anyone is in charge of the chaos. You breathe in, hold it, and let it out slow. Your body loosens. Around you, the buzz of televisions, the hiss of radios, the hum of servers all fade into a background lull. Conspiracies may fill the air, but here, lying down, eyes half closed, they are no more dangerous than the rustle of wind against the window. You let them wash over you, half lullaby, and drift further still. You lean back from the glowing screen, eyes blinking against the artificial light, and for a moment you feel suspended between centuries. The conspiracies of the modern world echo the same heartbeat you heard in ancient tales. Fear has never gone out of style, just changes costume. Yesterday it wore a crown of laurel leaves. Today it scrolls on your phone at midnight. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself walking through a medieval marketplace. The air is thick with smoke from cooking fires. Merchants shouting about fish that look slightly too stiff to be fresh. Children darting between carts. Everyone is worried about something. Famine, plague, the sudden eclipse overhead. A woman clutches her apron and mutters that the darkened sun means the end of days. You feel her worry vibrating, almost touching your skin. Fast forward, and you stand in a modern supermarket. Fluorescent lights buzzing above, shelves full, yet people still whisper about shortages, rising prices, disasters just around the corner. Different centuries, same knot in the stomach. Even laughter can sound alike across time. In ancient Athens, philosophers joked about how young people were ruining society with their laziness. You've heard the same complaint last week, except now it's about teenagers glued to TikTok. You smirk because the joke has a longer shelf life than the bread in your cupboard. And yet, the anxiety isn't always silly. Picture the 14th century as plague carts rumbled down cobblestone streets, bells tolling, families shuddering windows. Fear was not abstract. It was the smell of sickness carried on the wind. Centuries later, you sit at a kitchen table with hand sanitizer bottles lined up like soldiers, scrolling through pandemic headlines. The fear feels eerily familiar. The texture of dread, whether in Black Death or modern virus, presses the same weight onto the chest. But humans are not just fearful. They're inventive in how they explain that fear. Once comets streaking across the sky were heavenly warnings. Whole villages gathered in fields, pointing upward, debating whether doom or fortune would follow. These days, satellites glint in orbit, and someone online swears one of them isn't human-made. A lesser-known detail. In the 17th century, a Jesuit astronomer once proposed that comets might simply be optical illusions in the atmosphere. He was wrong, but charmingly so, and it reminds you that explanations, no matter how earnest, often age like milk. Still, the rhythm is the same. The unknown arrives, people panic, and stories bloom to fill the silence. Whether it's a god with thunderbolts or a hacker with algorithms, the formula doesn't change. Whispered, muttered, shouted. The sound of anxiety echoes down the centuries like footsteps in a long hallway. Think of common events that repeat. In Rome, the rumor that Nero fiddled while the city burned. In the 20th century, suspicions that leaders covered up disasters to keep control. Fire and scandal, whether lit by torches or headlines, become twin shadows. Historians still argue whether Nero truly played any instrument during the fire, or whether it was just slander polished into legend. You smile faintly. It's comforting in an odd way. To know even emperors were targets of gossip columns. The vivid scenes overlap when you place them side by side. In an ancient temple, priests sacrifice animals, reading entrails for hints about the future. You can almost smell the incense, heavy and sweet, clinging to the marble pillars. Now switch to a modern office, blinds half closed, where analysts pore over charts of climate data, stock prices, polling numbers. No incense, just burnt coffee. But the ritual is the same. A desperate attempt to see tomorrow before it arrives. You whisper softly to yourself. Maybe humans never stopped reading omens, they just swapped goats for graphs. And in the middle of all this, humor survives. A monk once scribbled in the margin of a manuscript that the world was surely ending soon. But he still left space for another line of commentary, just in case. You chuckle quietly. It's the medieval version of doom scrolling, yet remembering to charge your phone. Fear may loom large, but the human ability to multitask it with daily chores is eternal. Another echo. Communities once feared witches hexing their cattle. People whispered by the hearth, eyes darting, convinced misfortune came from neighbors with hidden powers. Now, a glitch in your Wi-Fi sparks the same suspicion, except the witch is your internet provider. Both times, you feel powerless, muttering under your breath, hoping it fixes itself. And still, the heart races. You walk through these mirrored anxieties, like a hallway lined with facing mirrors. Each reflection, older but familiar, and as you drift, a quiet realization slides into place. Fear has always been less about reality and more about connection. In the marketplace, in the kitchen, in the chat room, worry is a communal act. We cling to each other by sharing it, as if the telling itself is protective. Even so, there's irony tucked inside. Those ancients who trembled at eclipses would laugh at our fear of a stock market dip. And centuries from now, perhaps others will giggle that you once panicked over digital passwords expiring. Anxiety is funny that wit never feels trivial when it's yours, but history has a habit of turning it into comedy later. Whisper it softly. Today's headlines are tomorrow's punchlines. So, you inhale, slow and steady. You feel the weight of countless generations exhaling with you, setting down their fears for a moment. You don't need to solve every anxiety, just to recognize that you walked the same path as those before you, sometimes in darkness, sometimes under neon, but always carrying the same restless heart. And as you rest in this awareness, something gentler stirs. The noise of fears fades, like distant echoes in a cathedral, leaving only the rhythm of your breath. You are left with the possibility that perhaps the most important lesson isn't in fear itself, but in how we let it go. You linger in that long hallway of anxieties, reflections fading behind you, and now a softer doorway opens ahead. Not every prophecy was doom. Not every scroll carried thunder in its ink. Some spoke of peace, of renewal, of light gentler than morning sun filtering through cracked stone walls. It's almost startling to realize how much human imagination has invested in endings. while quietly people kept living, kept cooking bread, kept falling in love in the middle of all those apocalyptic warnings. You almost laugh at the thought someone probably fell asleep during a prophecy reading, snoring while others gasped at visions of fire and angels. Picture a scribe in a cave near Qumran, his oil lamp flickering low, fingers smudged with ink, carefully tracing words onto parchment. He pauses, not because of divine revelation, but because he's hungry. He gnaws on a date, wipes his hand on his robe, and gets back to inscribing cosmic battles between light and dark. You feel the humor of grand visions framed by very human rumbling stomachs, and yet, hidden among these dramatic writings were quieter hopes. One fragment whispered about the teacher of righteousness, a figure not bringing destruction but guidance. Some scholars think he was a real leader, others argue he was just symbolic. Historians still can't agree if he existed at all, but you sense the warmth behind the idea. Maybe what mattered wasn't whether he walked the earth, but that weary people imagined someone who could. That hope itself was an anchor, a candle in the desert night. Think about a more modern event, the World Wars. Prophecies swirled then, too, with people certain ancient texts predicted their exact moment. Soldiers read pocket-sized psalms, families clutched rosaries, and yet, amidst the chaos, there were still dancers in barns, kisses under rationed moonlight, letters stuffed with jokes about lousy army boots. Even in darkness, humans insist on carrying peace inside small gestures. It's the same stubbornness that makes you laugh at memes after a rough day. A lesser-known thread runs through the Dead Sea Scrolls about community living. They cared about when to eat, how to wash, how to sit in order during gatherings. To us it looks comically bureaucratic, like a divine HOA, but beneath the strictness was the real dream. That peace wasn't just a cosmic finale. It was in daily order, in knowing when to pass the bread without quarrel. You feel that lesson landing gently in your chest piece isn't only a prophecy, it's a practice. You walk further, the cave walls fading into soft light. The scrolls crumble in your hand, not into dust but into something like sand slipping between fingers. Each grain carries a story, each story dissolves into silence. And you notice, silence is not threatening. It is restful, like the quiet between waves, the pause between heartbeats. The comparison rises on its own. Ancient people feared eclipses, while you worry about battery percentages on your phone. They sought peace in rituals. You look for it in playlists or meditation apps. Different tools, same longing. The human thread stretches unbroken. And maybe the joke is that all along, peace was never hidden in caves or encrypted in parchment. It's right here, in the way your breath steadies when you stop chasing the next disaster headline. So you sit with it. You let the noise of prophecy settle. You don't need to know the future. You don't need to solve mysteries carved into stone. What you need is to feel your shoulders drop, the way weary travelers once unstrapped sandals at dusk, dust falling away as they exhaled. The cave widens into a kind of dreamscape now. You picture figures from across time gathering quietly. The shepherd who tossed his stone, the scribe still chewing on his date, the philosopher rolling his eyes at anxious youth, the monk doodling in the margins. They all sit beside you, tired, amused, oddly comforted. You're not alone in your restless thoughts. You never were, and now the rhythm slows. Your breath deepens, your body heavier against the bed. The prophecies dissolve like mist at dawn. Fear fades with them until only stillness remains. You realize the greatest secret the scrolls ever held is simple. life goes on, and peace is found not at the end of history, but in small, stubborn moments of joy. Your eyelids grow heavier, and the images soften. The desert fades into the hush of your own room, the fan whispering, the blankets warm. The ancient ink dries, the scrolls curl into silence, and you are left with only the rhythm of your breathing. It rises, it falls, a tide more certain than any prophecy. The faces from across time linger at the edge of vision. They nod gently, as if to say, yes, you've heard enough, it's safe to rest now. The shepherd sets down his sling, the scribe blows out his lamp, the monk folds the page. One by one, they settle into quiet, their stories dissolving into your own calm heartbeat. You drift through layers of stillness. The worries of the day slide off, light as parchment dust. The laughter of old jokes, the fears of long-gone wars, the predictions that never arrived, they all sink away. What remains is the soft truth that you are here, breathing, alive in a moment that needs no prophecy. Let yourself loosen into that. Let your mind wander like sand carried on a gentle wind. No scrolls, no secrets, no conspiracies left to untangle. Only the tender weight of the present. And as your thoughts grow slower, words stretch longer, and the edges of the story blur, you feel a quiet blessing settle around you. The kind that doesn't need to be written down to be real. The kind that whispers, "Sleep now, you are safe." End of script. Sweet dreams.